fast forward to 2015, both leaders signed, like Ethiopia and Egypt signed the Declaration of Principles. And that basically says that Egypt acknowledges the needs for development in Ethiopia, and also Ethiopia acknowledges that the needs to the right of water for Egypt and Sudan. So that's there because both countries understand the significance of conflict over water. But today in 2020, there are different realities, of course. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is facing a hard time in Ethiopia because of legal and constitutional mandates when it comes to elections and the government. Also, Egypt, it's distressed because of a lot of problems in the region, whether it's coming from Libya, it's whether Gaza or Eastern Mediterranean. So both countries are cornered because of domestic and foreign policy priorities. And that's indeed having a say in the conversation and somehow affecting the public discussions of the water issue. And instead of advocating for middle ground, we have voices that are starting to emerge that are advocating for harder and harsher responses.
William Davison, again, news just come in that Parliament had approved delaying the general election by 9 months. Is there this temptation in Ethiopia to get people to rally around the flag?
Well, there might be a little bit of that, but the GERD has always been a very popular project, and this issue of Ethiopia being deprived of its rights to the Nile has been a popular concern. So there's a strong consensus amongst the Ethiopian political classes and the wider public in support of the GERD and in support of the government's negotiating position, particularly to go ahead and fill the gap, to fill the dam in July. So it's clear that there's plenty of backing for the government position in Ethiopia. There isn't a great deal of support for the government to make compromises, and I think that's something which has been affecting the negotiations. But really, it's this Ethiopian resolve on the issue, which should be noted by the downstream countries and external actors, because the only way to get a deal which suits everybody is through the negotiations rather than through any diplomatic pressure, because that's just very unlikely to convince the Ethiopian government or the Ethiopian people to change their mind about this situation.
Mohammed Fouad, you're the member of parliament for Giza. We were, before the show, looking at old postcards of the pyramids. At the time, the Nile ran right past. Today, that's no longer the case, right?
Correct. That's no longer the case.
First, there was the building of the Aswan Dam, and now you have had population pressure. The days of the overflow of the Nile regulating the life of agriculture in Egypt are, of course, a distant memory now.
Absolutely. I mean, even with this share of the 55.5 billion cubic meter, Egypt still suffer with water shortage, even without the dam. So, I mean, the water resources are becoming scarce. The consumption can be as much as 80 billion cubic meter. I mean, we import half of the food products, and there are a lot of initiatives going down to conserve. So it's not that Egypt that is using the water foolishly. There are a lot of initiatives in order to conserve the use of water. But just as mentioned earlier, the concerns here are real. And what we're talking about is technical matters about having reasonable assurance and how the future will be shaped. I think it goes really beyond the actual filling time, but about having the actual mechanics on how to agree on how to agree.